Let's start, however, in East Africa, where Rwanda is set to surpass its investment target for the year by nearly 100%, at least if the numbers raised so far are anything to go by. It's managed to raise $1.254 billion out of the total NDA target of $1.3 billion, and that's happened within the first 6 months of 2013. According to the country's development agency, the Rwanda Development Board, between January and June this year, Rwanda registered $1.254 billion in total investment. Foreign direct investment, however, accounted for about a third of that total figure. Joint ventures stood at $338.1 million. Local investors committed $509 million as well. The construction sector was the greatest magnet for investment, netting $417.4 million. Energy and water were next with $255.5 million, and ICT accounting for $306.1 million. Tourism, on the other hand, got just $32.8 million, in agriculture $40 million of an investment, and the service sector $62 million in total. Ethiopia, on the other hand, expects to join the World Trade Organization in 2015, and it's not required, apparently, to comply with demands that it liberalizes its state-run banking and telecommunication sectors. The country's foreign ministry confirmed this development. It should be finalized by the third quarter of 2015. Ethiopia, of course, applied to join the body in 2003, but its hopes for membership were dependent on its government opening up key sectors to international competition. American officials have publicly asked the country to liberalize both sectors, but Ethiopia's government says they're both sensitive and their liberalization may harm its national interests. Its chances, however, were given a lifeline last year when the WTO lowered the bar for the world's least developed countries to join the global trading club by agreeing to new membership standards. Now, in Egypt, Ramadan has always been a month not only of holy ritual, but of celebrations as well. Late-night outings and high consumptions of food and sweets. Yasser Hakim now looks at the preparations for Ramadan and whether the current economic circumstances in Egypt will affect the citizens' celebrations there.
Moving around the streets on the eve of Ramadan month, you can see the spirit beginning to show, with the lanterns, music and decorations everywhere.
It's a beautiful month and people are looking forward to enjoying it. The festive mood is back. We have missed it in the past 2 years.
Politics has reshaped the people's lives here, with instability casting its shadow in the last 2 Ramadans. But for many, the smile is back on their faces.
The 30th of June uprising has brought back happiness in our houses. We will enjoy Ramadan for the very first time in years. We are planning celebrations all month.
If politics is on the up, the economic effects are still there for all to see, evident in the weak purchasing power of a month where Egyptians consume triple the average amount.
The austerity measures by the government have raised prices and had its toll on the seller and consumer.
The demand is low, not like before. Many people come here, but only half of them actually buy. The tariffs are higher, there are restrictions on imports, and taxes have increased. It's driving people away.
The prices are very high, 25 to 30% more than last year. We cannot afford this. The economic situation is hard on us.
But this will not deter Egyptians from enjoying the month of Ramadan. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
Now, the prolonged political and economic crisis in Egypt, of course, could have economic impact right across the region. One early worry came through last week when oil prices went up over fears of disruption to the transit of oil tankers through the Suez Canal. This week, however, it's tea sales in Kenya which took a body blow after buyers from Egypt, that's the largest global market for the beverage, stayed away. Tea is a major foreign exchange income earner for Kenya, one of the world's leading producers and exporters of the high-quality black tea, which is raking in about raked in about $1.3 billion in revenue in 2012. Now, Kenya's tea exports to Egypt had fallen steadily after the overthrow of President Hosni Mubarak in February 2011. Despite the absence of the Egyptians, however, prices remained fairly strong, with demand from newer markets kicking in, while the likes of Kazakhstan, Sudan, Yemen and other Middle Eastern countries had more modest buys in today's auction. The analysts have said that prolonged unrest in Egypt could even hurt the Kenyan currency in future. Right, let's get some more analysis on all the stories we've got coming out of Egypt for you. We've got CCTV's and Miriam Bemad live in London and Yasser Kim live in the Egyptian capital of Cairo as well. Miriam, let's start with you over in London. Let's put a number on the actual needs for Egypt as far as balance of payment supports are concerned over the next 2 years.
Well, Rama, analysts here in Europe are estimating that Egypt's external financing needs are at about $20 billion US for the fiscal year of 2014, with an expectation that its deficit will likely be in the double digits. Now, there's growing fears that Egypt is on the brink of a major financing shortfall, and adding to that is massive rollover requirements on domestic debt, which could be about a quarter of the GDP or about $64 billion. The concern is that it's also a very difficult funding environment for banks lending to the government. Corporates are being crowded out, and the longer it takes Egypt to secure an IMF deal or make reforms to reduce its dependency on foreign capital, the closer it is to a full-blown crisis.
Indeed, Yasser, however, in the absence of re-engagement of the IMF, we've seen Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE stepping in to that breach, as it were. But how long really can Egypt continue to depend on bilateral aid deals of this sort?
I just want to add Kuwait, which announced today another $4 billion added to the Saudi Arabian and United Arab Emirates. So we've got like 12 billion only in the last 2 days. But we had Qatar 8 billion before, Libya 2 billion before, Turkey 2 billion. It's not about lending, it's not about loans, because at the end you have to pay most of this money back with interest. What is needed at this point is to try to get back to production, income from tourism, foreign investments, and that's what the new interim prime minister is saying. He's saying his first task is not to work on economy, but actually to work on security and national reconciliation. As long as the Muslim Brotherhood are in the streets making problems there and violence, it will be a problem to get investments into Egypt and tourists back. So it's time that Egypt stops the loans and starts to work on an economic plan to increase income rather than to borrow.
Indeed. Let's pick up on a trend from what Yasser just said there, Miriam. We've seen quite the turnaround here, especially with respect to the Gulf states. Of course, Qatar's sunk in about $7 or so billion in aid to the Egyptians so far. But now we're seeing the Kuwaitis, the Saudis, the UAE, the Emirates coming through. What changed here?
It seems to be, from the analysts that we spoke with, it was very difficult for investors to work with the former government and the Muslim Brotherhood. The expectation from the UAE and Saudi Arabia is for the interim government to have technocrats overseeing economic concerns, along, of course, with what Yasser was saying about attracting people back to Egypt. The new government will have to tackle the collapse of the Egyptian pound, along with a financing crunch for corporates and high inflation. Many are hoping this new interim government will also come up with new reforms in fuel subsidies, which is a major concern. The common thought is, though, that when the money comes from the Gulf, Egypt's foreign reserves will likely be sufficient to cover more than about four or so months of imports. News of the funding has lifted overall investor sentiment in the short term, but there's certainly a lot of caution looking ahead.
Finally, Yasser, this is a story, of course, we covered quite extensively in the course of 2013, the law on Islamic bonds. That was passed before, when Mohamed Morsi was in power. Now he's out. What happens to the law? Will it still be implemented, or is that plan in limbo?
The problem is the parliament has been disbanded and suspended, and the law wouldn't go without a parliament approval. The law itself, the Islamic bonds itself, is not a problem. The issue is in the law there were some articles that would give a foreign country or any entity the ownership of the basic Egyptian land or institutions, something that is not private. What the investors are saying, the Islamic bonds should only be concerned with private enterprises, not public and state-owned enterprises. When it's back, it will go through, but it will take a year and some amendments in the law, and it will not go through unless a new parliament and a new president is sworn in, which is by first quarter of 2014. So we'll see what the new interim administration will do, but all economists are saying the Islamic bonds are essential. They are dealt with all over the world, not just in Islamic countries. It's just to put a law that would be accepted by all.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being, though. Thank you very much for your insights, both of you. CCTV's Yasser Kim in Cairo and Miriam Bamad in London. Now, let's move on to something completely different, specifically agriculture in Kenya. The country will step up agricultural outreach programs in East Africa's largest economy in a bid to enhance agricultural output and productivity while attracting the country's youth into the sector. That's been a very thorny problem. Now, even though agriculture, of course, remains the mainstay of the country's economy, it accounts for about a quarter or so of GDP, many young Kenyans are simply not attracted to the sector. They feel, essentially, it's beneath their status. Here's CCTV's Peter Akaba with one outreach initiative that's recording some measure of success.
Farmers hard at work in rural Kenya. Drought, low soil fertility and poor farming methods are holding this sector back. Africa's unemployed youth have shunned this sector, but organizations are now working with the Kenyan government to improve outreach through events like annual trade fairs.
We are working with small-scale farmers in semi-arid areas in the highlands. We have developed a number of different techniques. Mainly we teach on soil and water conservation, whereby the farmers can make terraces, different types of terraces in different ways on the farm. This is for holding the water.
Low productivity is the biggest challenge facing farmers here. Modern technology and better skills would go a long way to improving yields and making farming a viable business.
We are practicing the traditional high-value crops. These are the crops that can do well in areas that are prone to drought or areas that have low rainfall. So we are doing things like the millets, the sorghum, cassava, cowpeas, and these do very well in the semi and arid areas.
In many urban areas, households are also incurring large food bills due to high food prices. With maize being the staple food here due to food preferences, the commodity is generally in short supply, and many households have limited choices of other foodstuffs. Adoption of techniques to harvest water results in better produce.
It's a simple construction that ensures that even the farmers who are a bit elderly can also be able to get the water and they're able to irrigate their farms. So mainly is an issue of harvesting water when we have it and keeping it to use during the drought.
The Agricultural Society of Kenya trade fairs then are one such avenue of outreach to tackle some of the major challenges facing agriculture in Kenya. Peter Okaba, CCTV.
Time for a short break here on Africa Live. There's plenty more, however, coming up. In South Africa, President Zuma has reshuffled his cabinet, dismissing businessman and former rival Tokyo Sexwale. Welcome back. The South African head of state, Jacob Zuma, has replaced Tokyo Sexwale as housing minister in a cabinet shake-up. Now, that move is widely regarded as a body blow to the wealthy businessman and the anti-apartheid icon, who's been quite critical of his rival's handling of Africa's largest economy. This is the fourth time since 2009 that the president has made changes to his national executive team. Commentators, however, were quite surprised that the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, kept her post following the school textbook scandal last year, and the Communications Minister, Dina Pule, is out. She has been immersed in scandals and allegations for more than a year now.
20 years of democracy have changed the face of our country. And the last 5 years have pushed that change forward. I've decided to make some changes to the national executive. We thank the outgoing ministers for their contribution in taking the work of governance forward and creating a better life for all. We wish all incoming members of the National Executive all the best in their new portfolios.
Still in South Africa, but this time with a more personal SME focus. This individual left the high life in Wall Street to help entrepreneurs grow in South Africa. South African-born Yusuf Rendira Rees is now taking his Awethu project across the continent to see if its success in South Africa can be replicated elsewhere. CCTV Sumitra Naidu takes a look at how this incubator program is empowering thousands of young people.
Yusuf Rendira Rees left South Africa about 10 years ago to study at Oxford and Harvard. He brought that knowledge back to South Africa to help young entrepreneurs. He started the Awethu incubator 4 years ago to help entrepreneurs from under-resourced communities in the country.
Let's look at models that actually work in an African context to identify talent, and then let's invest properly in the development of people, not so that they can tell a nice spaza shop story where middle-class people can pat each other on the back and say, isn't that sweet? But really to invest in that talent so people can grow real, sustainable, scalable businesses.
Awethu identifies new and existing entrepreneurs in low-income areas. It then provides them with funding, skills and guidance. Awethu also helps with startup capital.
So that if you wanted, for example, your dream is to open a restaurant in a fancy area in Joburg, we'll say, fine, let's start selling plates out of your mom's kitchen. There's no cost there, you can use this money, let's start making a living and let's learn about the restaurant business. And as you grow, we'll help you to access the resources you need to get to where your ultimate dream is, which is running that big restaurant,
Afro's Fast Foods is one of almost 100 businesses which are now part of the Awethu project.
We started selling from outside nightclubs and we wanted to create more jobs, but we saw that we cannot even work for only weekends. Then we started, during the week, we started to sell pap and liver, and then we saw that we can work, we can make chance for, we can sell more food during the week.
Within a few months, Afro opened a second branch.
Yes, we did the bookkeeping, but we found out when we made Awethu that we were doing it but not in the right way. So from there we changed the way we were doing things, and they also helped us about the forecast of our business.
Awethu finds its entrepreneurs by going out into the communities. The candidates are then put through a rigorous testing process.
We're looking for the people who want to change their lives for themselves, who want to make money for themselves, who want to grow business for themselves, but also who want to be role models and leaders for their communities.
In the next 2 years, Awethu is planning to expand its focus into the rest of the continent. Africa has a fairly underdeveloped informal economy, but Awethu believes that entrepreneurs can thrive anywhere as long as they're given the right tools and education. Sumitra Naidu, CCTV, Johannesburg.
Now, political reshuffles, of course, weren't the only big news out of South Africa today. The country's main electricity supplier, Eskom, reported results for the year ending March, in which its net profits dropped by more than half to just under $520 million. Now, revenues were up 12%, but operating costs were up 31% over the same period. So what do today's results mean for the firm's next financial year, especially given the delays it's facing over the Medupi power project? Let's find out. CCTV's Angelo Coppola is live in Johannesburg today. Angelo, the Eskom finance director attributed the fall in electricity sales to weaker demand and a weaker than expected economic outlook. So where does this essentially leave the company's outlook for the rest of the year?
Well, they're fortunate in that they've been guaranteed an 8% increase per annum for the next 5 years. So whether there's a reduction in economic demand, in other words, more electricity usage or not, they're still going to be guaranteed that 8% increase across the board. So the consumers in the industrial and the residential and the retail side are all going to be paying 8% more. Cumulatively, comes to 40% over the next 5 years. So if demand does kind of subdue a little bit, it might give the utility the opportunity to fix some of those older plants that they've got on board. But I mean, bottom line is that the financial markets still like the utility story. They're sitting on a huge debt burden of 323 billion rand, which is a huge amount of money. And their annual cost for staff, for example, are sitting at around 23 billion. So the numbers don't look very well or very good, but there's a nice pipeline. They can still draw down from the institutional investors that are in for the long haul. So it's still a good story because of those projected increases that are in place for the next 5 years, Rahman.
Indeed, but speaking about local demand, especially with Eskom, aren't they also artificially managing that? Because that also then leads them a bit to a sort of dilemma. Because on one hand, if they do manage demand through buybacks, demand will essentially be managed to whatever extent they have in mind. The costs do rise, but the revenues at the end of the day still get hammered. So really, should they essentially stop the program or just continue with business as usual?
Well, that buyback program came to an end at the end of May. So going forward, the industrial users that were benefiting from not having enough productivity or using the production facilities and using electricity aren't going to be able to take advantage. So the buyback program's out the way. We do know that they can't actually get any more electricity out of the aging power station setup that they've got at the moment. So it's likely that they're going to go to the wind farm route. And if they need to fund those wind farms for the electricity that they need to put onto the grid, what they're going to do then is probably use the increase of 8% to fund that. But I guess they're kind of hoping that there won't be an economic upturn so that they don't have to lay out that extra cash. Rahman?
Indeed, that should be an interesting play altogether. We'll keep tabs on that story. Thank you very much for that. That's CCTV's Angela Coppola live in Johannesburg, South Africa. Now, quick run through the markets for you. Yet another day when you're seeing some fairly strong numbers coming through across the markets. In Nigeria, for example, the all-share index ended the day higher by 0.3. The all-share index in South Africa, however, ending the day in the red by just about half a percentage point. The 20-share index in Nairobi finally getting some steam back, ending the day higher by about 0.8. And the Egyptian market also springing up with that wellspring of positivity, especially given what we've seen so far with the establishment of a new government. Whether or not the politics filters into the market over the next couple of trading sessions, we'll have to wait and see. But those are your closing numbers, and that's business for you.